Thank you to the university, to Edmundo, to the other members of the panel for this opportunity to speak about OpenCourseWare with you. And what I would like to do is briefly share a little of the history of OpenCourseWare, how the concept came about, how it spread, and then talk mostly about the benefits of OpenCourseWare for the people who use the materials and also for the universities that publish the materials. Now, before I do, though, I'd like to take a quick detour and talk a little bit about what a university is, or one way of thinking about what a university provides to its students that will be helpful for us in talking about OpenCourseWare and understanding what OpenCourseWare is. So universities, for almost as long as they've been around, have provided three things to their students: content to be studied, learning experiences shaped around that content, and also some kind of a certification or recognition of the study that's been achieved. And this worked well for a very long time until universities were confronted with the disruptive influence that many of you, I think, are familiar with, the internet. And about the year 2000, a great many universities were trying to figure out what the internet meant for their institution. MIT was among them. For many of the universities, the answer was the online university, was to take that three-part package of content, learning experience, and certification and put it online. And many universities have been successful at that, and it's been a very good thing. It's brought education to a wider audience, and it has helped with the need for wider certification. MIT, though, when it thought about the problem, recognized that it was not going to be very good at distance learning. And that's because MIT is a very small institution with only about 10,000 students and 1,000 faculty. They're some of the most high-performing students in the world, and they're taught with some of the best facilities in the world. And it was not going to be easy or inexpensive for MIT to take that method of instruction and put it online. But MIT felt like there was a tremendous opportunity that was presented by the internet, not just to reach a wider audience, but to reach a truly global audience. An audience for whom certification maybe was not the need, but really needed access just to the content itself. And they saw in the internet an opportunity to provide access to that content. That's, in a nutshell, the idea behind OpenCourseWare. Take the content minus the learning experience, minus the certification. So on the OpenCourseWare site, there's no access to faculty, no access to other students, and you don't get a degree or a certification for using the materials. But taking that content, using the internet, that's the idea, to spread the content around the globe. Who's providing OpenCourseWare? Well, we talked a little bit about this in the introduction. It started at MIT, and I'm sorry the stars are not showing up on the open software here. It started at MIT and it spread to 250 universities and organizations around the world. In the United States, a great many private institutions, including Johns Hopkins and Notre Dame, and many of the big state schools, UMass, Arizona State, Michigan State. Around the world, you're probably familiar with at least one of these groups, but large numbers of universities have joined. I think that Pedro was telling me earlier there were 103 under the Universidad umbrella at this point from Spain and Latin America. The Paris Tech Group is 11 schools, JOCW is 23, CORE represents, depending on how you count them, somewhere between 10 and 50 schools. And the Apticom group at the bottom represents 750 Indonesian universities. So this has spread very far across the globe very quickly, much more quickly than we had anticipated at MIT. Just how quickly? Well, we started out to publish all of MIT's courses, which MIT has about 2,000 courses. By 2006, we had roughly 1,500 of them up. And by that time already, there were more courses published by other schools than had been published by MIT. And that has only grown more dramatic in the past couple of years. We're now up to almost 13,000 courses published by the 250 or so universities participating in OpenCourseWare. And even more exciting, the governments around the world are beginning to recognize OpenCourseWare as a cost-effective way of solving some of the most challenging problems that they're facing, including workforce education, teacher training, improving educational systems. And so you can see the U.S. Department of Education and ministries of education in China, Vietnam, Indonesia, Brazil, and the Netherlands all have initiatives that are based either on OpenCourseWare or similar types of open educational resources. But really, what are we talking about when we talk about OpenCourseWare? What do you get if you go to the site? Well, as I said, it's content, and primarily that means documents, the kind of documents that you would receive if you were sitting in the classroom. We've just taken those documents, digitized them, and put them on the web. So it's, by and large, not interactive material at all, but primarily static. Syllabi, readings, lecture notes, assignments, exams. In cases where we have the ability to do so, we also publish textbooks, simulations and animations if they're available, and of course video and audio have been very popular and have garnered a lot of attention in the media. All of these materials, you may be familiar with this, are available under an open license, and the license permits the materials to be used and distributed and copied. It also permits you to modify the material so you can make derivative works. Most universities that share the materials make the materials available with a few restrictions. And those restrictions include attribution to the faculty member who produced the material and also the school who published it. Usually a requirement that if you create a derivative work, that derivative work is also available under an open license. And in some cases, there's a non-commercial restriction that prohibits the use of the materials to make money. These are open licenses. I think that many of you are probably familiar with these open licenses and others like them. So what difference has it made, all of this publication of open educational materials? A large part of my job, as was said, is to study the impact that the materials are having. Much of the data that you'll see here is specific to the MIT course. You'll see a little MIT logo next to data that's MIT specific. But in terms of reaching that global audience, we think that we've done very well. Just a partial reporting from the members of the OpenCourseWare Consortium, you can see that by 2006 there were almost 9 million visits to OpenCourseWare courses around the world. This does not include large chunks of the OpenCourseWare content from China and from other regions that weren't reporting traffic. And you can see again in the last 3 years it's grown even more dramatic. And my guess is there's probably twice as much in the blue. The red represents MIT's traffic, the blue represents traffic from other universities. And my guess is that that blue bar could be as much as twice as high if we had all of the schools reporting. In total, we've been able to record 93.5 million visits to the OpenCourseWare content, the 13,000 courses that are out there. And the audience is truly a global audience. 41% of the people coming to the MIT site come from outside of North America. 21% come from East Asia and the Pacific. 19% from Europe and Central Asia. 8% from South Asia. 5% from the Middle East. 4% from Latin America. And 1.5% from Sub-Saharan Africa. Now, a large part of this is due to the connectivity issues in Sub-Saharan Africa, and MIT has copied our site, put it on hard disks, and sent it to 200 universities in bandwidth-constrained regions so that they can access it on their local area networks. Who are all of these people coming to the site? Well, for MIT, 9% of them are educators at other universities, and that's really who we had in mind when we set this up to begin with. We were thinking that these would be materials that the other educators could take, modify for use in their own classroom, and present to their students. And we've seen large numbers of educators who've done so. 42% are students at other universities, and they're taking the materials and they're either studying subjects they won't have time to study, or they're complementing the materials they get from their own faculty members. The big surprise to us was that 43% of the people who were coming to the site are not connected to a university at all, but are independent learners who are coming to the site. And as I said before, we didn't start out to do a distance learning site. We don't consider OpenCourseWare really to be distance learning, but it's clear that it does support independent learning for some learners with some sets of the content that we put up. Talk a little bit more about these uses. If you survey the educators, most of them will tell you they're trying to develop their own personal knowledge, and secondarily, learning new teaching methods. And it's only the third one, incorporating materials, that is the one that we imagined would be the primary use of the site. But even among educators, they're mostly learning for their own personal knowledge. And also learning new teaching methods was interesting to us because they would come and they would look at the video lectures of a course that wasn't necessarily in their field, but they wanted to see how the faculty member taught that subject, and they wanted to take those teaching approaches and employ those teaching approaches in their own classes using different subject matter. This is Professor Triatno Harjoko. He's the head of an architecture department in Indonesia, and we interviewed him about his use of the site, and he was using it to help his entire department think more about interactive approaches to teaching. And what he said, I think, was very revealing, because he said it wasn't just the access to the content, but it was the access to how MIT thinks about a subject like architecture, because you can see all of the courses in the entire department. You can see what they teach first, what they teach second, what they teach third. And so this allows for a deep view into MIT's teaching approach that was very helpful to him when he started to reshape his own curriculum. The data for students, 44% of students, again, are using it as a self-learning mode. So 43% are independent learners, and both among students and faculty, independent learning is the primary use that they make of the site. In addition to that, students, as I said, are complementing the materials they get from from their own instructors. So if they don't understand a subject in their class, they can go to our site and watch the video lecture and see how the MIT professor presents it and get a different view. And then they also use it as a planning tool to figure out what they want to study, what courses they might want to take at their own institution. They find the course on our site that is similar to theirs, and they get a better idea of what they would be studying if they took that course. This is Kunle Ajumo. Kunle is a student in Nigeria at one of the top engineering schools there, but even among his class, only about 20–25% of the students actually had access to the internet. And so as part of the course, he was going to an internet cafe and printing up the materials and taking the materials into class and giving them to his instructor. And the instructor got very excited about having the resource available. It was unlike anything else they had available in the area. And so he kept going back and printing up more, and eventually he brought the whole set of class materials in for his class to work with, and they were very appreciative. But he talks about how access to the materials was able to help him gain a deeper understanding of the material in class. Now, looking at these self-learners, you can see a bunch of different ways that the self-learners are using the site. 41% of them say that they're learning just for their personal enjoyment. They have no interest in getting a degree, certificate, anything like that. They're not studying anything that really has to do with work, but they're just learning because they never had the opportunity to learn in this way. And so now they have resources available, they have time available, they're coming to the site. A large number of them are preparing for return to formal study, and when we talk to these individual learners, they tell us that it's great for them because they can practice with the materials and not only gain subject knowledge, but they can gain confidence that they're going to be successful when they do get into a formal setting. And then when you talk to professionals who are using the site, they're using it, one way they're using it is to refresh their understanding of the basics, and another way is to keep current on changes in the field. We talked to an engineer from GE who's telling us she's been in applied sciences for so long, she's forgotten the basic sciences. And this was a great tool for her to go back and refresh her knowledge of the basic sciences. This is Wendy Emerald. Wendy's a researcher in the Polar Science Center. And she's sort of our limit case for how far OpenCourseWare can reach. Because she does have internet access up there. It's cold, it's dark, there's not a lot to do. So she spends a lot of time on OpenCourseWare. And she talks about the reach and how it puts previously untouchable subjects within the access of anyone who's interested in getting to them. So that's great. We know that we're producing some benefit worldwide. We know that we've got a lot of courses out there. But the next question is, why do universities do this? Well, what do they get out of this? Since they're not making money, it's not distance learning. And even at a university like MIT, money doesn't fall out of the sky. So we have to have reasons for publishing the materials openly. And although it wasn't clear at the beginning what the benefit was going to be, and that the faculty really wanted to do this to support global education, they thought there would be some benefits for MIT, and there certainly have been. And those benefits come in three categories. It's improved our worldwide engagement, it provides a connection to our students unlike anything we've ever had before, and it helps improve teaching and learning throughout the institute in a variety of ways. So in terms of engagement, obviously we've had tremendous publicity from having done this, but frankly we probably could have published 200 courses worth of material, not 2,000, and gotten much of the same publicity. But it's been nice. But even at an even deeper level, it's really helped to build the reputation of the faculty, the individual faculty at MIT, and also the departments at MIT. And we were actually very surprised by these numbers when we surveyed the faculty, that a third of the ones who published with us say that it's improved their standing in the field. Many of them already are prominent faculty in their field, and so that was kind of a shock to us. And that nearly 2/3 of them think that it's improved the standing of their department is also very exciting. And almost all the faculty say that it's enhanced the Institute's reputation. This is Charles Stewart. He's the head of the political science department, and he describes how it's helped the faculty out. It gives them a broader audience than purely an academic audience, is basically what he says. And for a few select faculty that we have, Walter Lewin, who's the physics instructor, Gil Strang, who's a linear algebra instructor, their videos are on YouTube, and they have become modest web celebrities. They get fan mail from all over the world. They get hundreds of thousands of views of their videos. So it can widen the exposure that you get as a faculty member tremendously. It's also helped MIT to collaborate. The president of MIT, Susan Hockfield, talks about OpenCourseWare as MIT's single biggest international engagement. MIT doesn't have satellite campuses. It doesn't do a lot of work in other places. But the OpenCourseWare site has really helped MIT to connect with the world in some very substantial ways. The faculty say that it's been an important element of international engagement. We have student groups that go around the world with those hard drives and help universities around the world to implement use of OpenCourseWare materials. It's for individual faculty, it's sparked collaborations. Our Dean of Undergraduate Education, his name is Daniel Hastings, is also an astronomics instructor. And based on a course that he published, he was contacted by the Italian Space Agency, and they've started a collaboration. These are collaborations that would not have happened without OpenCourseWare. And then, of course, we've formed relationships with many universities around the world, including Politecnica de Madrid, through the OpenCourseWare Consortium. So that's been wonderful for us as well. In terms of our connection to the students, it attracts prospective students to the school. About half of the incoming freshmen have already seen OpenCourseWare and been to the site. About a third of those say it influenced which school they chose to go to, so it's helped us to recruit students. And the faculty agreed that it's helped to recruit. Most students, while they're at MIT, use the OpenCourseWare site to support their learning, 93% of the undergraduates and 85% of the graduates. And they report a very high impact on student experience. The class of 2009 actually made the OpenCourseWare program its choice for their class gift. Each year a class collects money and gives it to a program that they want to support. And the freshmen from the class of, or the undergraduates from the class of 2009 chose us, which we think really highlights the value they find in it. This is Aaron Walker. He's an environmental science student at MIT. And one of the things that people were concerned with early on was, would the students not like OpenCourseWare because it was giving away what they were paying a fair amount of money to get. And the student reaction has been very similar across the board to what Aaron says here, that it brings into focus, publishing the content openly brings into focus what you can't get on the web, which is that interactive experience and the certification. And those are the things that, especially the interaction with students and faculty on the MIT campus, access to the MIT facilities, is really what being an MIT student is all about. And the students very much support the global mission of sharing the content openly and don't feel like it undercuts what they're paying for. Most alumni of MIT use the OpenCourseWare site. 51% said they did in 2005 was the last time we were able to survey them. The numbers have, I'm sure, gotten higher since then. They rate it as a very valuable resource. They say it enhances MIT's reputation. And every time we talk to senior administrators after they've gone on a trip and gone anywhere in the world, the first thing they say to us is, you wouldn't believe how many people have come up to me and said, I'm so pleased that MIT has done the OpenCourseWare project. So they get a lot of positive response when they're out on the road. Now, in terms of how it's helped education, it's a little bit more diffuse. It's not as clear as some of the other benefits. But one way is that it's improved the content at MIT. As faculty go to publish their materials openly, usually the faculty members have 6 things that they would change to their course if they could find time. By asking them to publish openly like this, they go and they find the time and they make the changes, and so the materials get better over time. They say they've improved the materials. They say they've improved their comfort teaching with the web. They've been able to rethink their approach to teaching. And a great many of them access their peers' materials when they're creating their new course. They'll go and see what the other instructors are using and borrow some of those materials. In terms of advising, it's been a tremendous tool both for faculty and students. 46% of the students use it as an advising tool, and during advising week we see sharp spikes in traffic coming from the MIT domain. The faculty say that they have more information. They say it improves their advising as well. And then in terms of learning, about 70% of the MIT students complement the materials they get in their own classes with the materials that we've published, which are from previous versions. So typically during exam time, they'll come to the site and get the exams from 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and they'll work through those problems to prepare for their exams that they'll take in a couple of days. As I said, they also study independently. If they're not going to be able to take a course while they're at MIT, they'll nonetheless go to the OpenCourseware site and learn more about it. And it allows them to move forward and backward in the curriculum in a very interesting way. This is Professor Karen Wilcox. Karen is an aeronautics instructor who came to MIT about 6 years ago, I think now. And when she came to MIT, she was absolutely shocked that her junior level aeronautics students didn't know the math that she expected them to know. She thought, this is MIT. The students should know the math. And so she marched down to the math department and she said, why don't the students know the math? And the math professor, in this case it was Haynes Miller, said they do know the math, but we call it something entirely different. We use different terminology to talk about it. And she said, well, that's a problem. And so she and Haynes Miller sat down and they mapped all of the math concepts from her course to all of the math concepts from his and the other math courses. And we built that mapping into the OpenCourseware site so that now if you're going through her course on the OpenCourseware site, you come across a math concept that you need help with, you can click a link and go back to the freshman level class where that concept is taught. And the MIT students do this informally all the time. Even though the links aren't necessarily built into all the courses, they still, if they are in a freshman level course and they're wondering why they need to know this obscure formula, they can go to their junior and senior curriculum and see where the formula is applied. And if they're in that junior or senior level course and they've completely forgotten the formula because they didn't study when they were a freshman, they can go back and find the materials and study the materials all over again. And so I think that that's really one of the most powerful aspects of OpenCourseware for the MIT community is the transparency that it provides to the universities that publish the content. I think many of your universities are already doing OpenCourseware, so this last part may be information you already have, but a little bit of how you can encourage OpenCourseware or open educational resource publication on your campuses. And for MIT, what it really came down to was building a culture of openness in a lot of different ways. Right now, a good way to build a culture of openness is first to use the open materials that are out there. You have an advantage MIT didn't have, and there are tons and tons of resources that are now available from all kinds of universities, all kinds of languages, all kinds of cultures. So there's a tremendous amount of material out there. And when you use it, then license it openly and share it back to the community. And then encourage your institutions to build the policies and the incentives necessary to get people creating OpenCourseware content. The consortium is a great resource for doing all three of these things. Mary Lou and her staff work very hard to support schools that are interested in doing OpenCourseware publication. The consortium is an independent nonprofit. It maintains a portal that links to all of the different OpenCourseware resources that are available from the member institutions. Its vision is that eventually we reach a world where anyone who has the desire to learn can do so easily by reaching out to open resources that support their instruction. The mission of the OpenCourseware Consortium is to advance formal and informal learning through the worldwide sharing and use of free, open, high-quality educational materials organized as courses. But beyond just the mission and beyond the portal that they provide, the consortium staff helps member institutions in a number of different ways. First is visibility. In addition to the portal, we also speak around the world and we refer people to different sorts of resources. So if you're involved in the consortium, we can get more eyes on your site. The second is support. It's very easy with this new field of open publication to get in over your head. But the nice thing about the consortium is there's already somebody in the community who's already been there and can help you out when you run into trouble. And by contacting myself, by contacting Mary Lou, any one of the board members, we can connect you to others in the community that can help you to solve some of the tough problems that emerge. And again, these guys with the bus, it's collaboration. It's an opportunity to not only get advice from the community, but to share what you learn through your own publication processes with the community so that we can learn from you and we can get together and work on various projects. Right now, the consortium is supporting work in the areas of health, agriculture, K through 12, and there was one more. What's the other one? Community college level work. So there are members who have come together to focus on these different areas and collaborate on improving education at those levels. The consortium hosts a meeting each year. We have one coming up very soon in Hanoi, Vietnam, and then next year, May 4th through 6th, at the MIT campus in Cambridge. So you're encouraged to attend both of those meetings. And finally, the consortium is led by an international group on the board of directors, including my good friend Edmundo, who's second from the bottom there. So we're also supported by member dues and by the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, and a number of universities around the world, I think 13 or 14, have stepped forward to provide extra funding to support the OpenCourseWare Consortium as we're building staff and building our organization. And University Politecnica de Madrid is one of those sustaining members, and we're very grateful for the support that they've provided. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
So let me maybe ask one question. What are the next steps? What is the future? What do you foresee for the coming years?
Next steps, well, I can divide that into two pieces. One is MIT, and the other is sort of the consortium and the broader movement. For MIT, we're beginning a new project where we're going to publish about 20 courses. We're going to stay with the OpenCourseWare model basically, but as I said at the beginning, we really thought of this as a tool for educators to use, and it turns out it's really not. It's mainly self-learners who are using the materials. And so there are subtle differences in the way we would present our content if we were structuring it for self-learners. And we've gotten a grant that's going to help us reshape about 20 of the foundational courses so they will be more appropriate and more convenient for self-learners to use. So we're going to begin publishing the first of those in the fall. We're very excited about that. For the consortium, I think the really exciting thing is the level of government involvement that we've seen, and we think that we're moving from universities publishing their materials and trying to generate benefits on their own to a situation where you're beginning to see governments around the world actually integrating OpenCourseWare and open education into their global strategies. So in the United States, the Obama administration has been very thoughtful about ways that they might fund and support OpenCourseWare at the community college level to support workforce training as we try to move out of this period of economic depression that we've been in. There are a lot of displaced workers in the United States who are going to need new skills to survive. And so the Obama administration is looking to OpenCourseWare at the community college level as a solution for that. There's other creative examples around the world of governments using OpenCourseWare. Indonesia has a really interesting program where they have 750 universities that are spread all over the archipelago. And for their electrical engineering instruction, they use the IEEE curriculum, but that's only 80 credits, and you need 120 to graduate there. So they have 40 extra credits that they use to provide minors that prepare the students for working with Indonesian industries. But the problem they have is that all 750 of those universities can't support all the different specialties that they want to provide. So what they're doing is they're asking schools to concentrate on a particular minor and then publish those materials openly. And the students will be able to access the OpenCourseWare content, both to pick a minor that's of interest to them, and also to use the materials and then to remotely interact with the faculty at the individual or the individual schools that have those specialties. So it's a really thoughtful integration of open education strategies into their educational system. Do you have other future things for the consortium that I should share?
We need to continue to do the kind of research that MIT has been doing, but on a global scale, to figure out how OpenCourseWare is impacting and integrating around the world. MIT has been leading the movement in many ways, but since the movement has spread around 250 universities, we need to focus a little bit more on the international. And that's certainly where your universities can help. If you're interested in doing the kinds of research to find the data that Steve presented today, we'd love to hear from you to help you figure out how to go forward and do that kind of research.
Yes.
Till now, the contents are mostly based on documents.
Mm-hmm.
For helping into deploying for easing the deployment into the learning management system, at the beginning, at least in the MIT approach, they will plan to use standards, such as IMS or this kind of standards, e-learning standards for helping to deploy the content more easily into the institutions. What is the approach now that it's so big and so difficult to manage?
Yeah, it was an interesting challenge for us when we started the project because our mandate was to publish all of MIT's content, and that's 1,800 courses. To do that, we had to find a relatively simple way to publish the content because we had a lot to publish. And the other challenge that we faced, interestingly enough, is that MIT faculty at the time we started weren't using the web as a teaching tool very widely. Only about half of the faculty were actually using the web at the time. And about 30% were using the LMSs, and there were 4 of them that were being used around the school at the time. And 20% of the faculty were actually coding their own websites. So that's sort of the diversity of faculty skills that we had to work with. And we thought at the beginning, well, what we'll do is we'll try to encourage the 50% who aren't using the learning management system to use the learning management system. And then that'll give us a nice place where it's organized and is digitized, and we can then collect it and move it into OpenCourseWare. And we were absolutely unsuccessful at getting the MIT faculty to change their practices in teaching. But what we did was we then said, okay, well, we'll just take the materials you have in whatever format. And typically that was, many of them were PDFs that had been generated out of LaTeX. Some of it were Microsoft Word documents. In a few cases, they were actually just paper documents that they had been using the same paper notes with additions and things scratched out and so forth. And we would take them and we would do what we had to get them digitized and on our site, including taking those paper notes and having somebody transcribe them and turn them into nice digital documents. And what we found was after we had done that, the faculty would come back to us and say, wow, it's really great to have this available so my students can get to it. This has been such a nice thing. But can you make changes for the next semester? And we would say, no, we can't. We don't have the capacity to do that. But we can take your materials and put them over here in the learning management system, and you or your TA can make changes. And learning management system at MIT is now used by about 80% of the faculty. And so it drove adoption of those technical tools, but it drove it in sort of the opposite we expected. And because of that, we really haven't had a lot of success at pushing more deeply into standardized approaches. The power relationship at MIT is very interesting. The faculty are very, very powerful. And the entire program is voluntary. We can't compel them to share their content. So we have to work with them and what they're willing to do. Our hope is over time that we will continue to engage them and get them more interested in more interactive types of content. And over time we can build our systems to do that. But for the foreseeable future, the short answer to your question is I think we're going to continue primarily to be working with fairly static documents. Now, when you download something off of our site, it does come as a SCORM-compliant package with a manifest and everything else, but it's still fairly static materials. We've done an assessment of what it would take to turn it into XML or MathML, and the problem with it is that the level of effort associated with that goes up very, very rapidly, especially as you get into formulas. If you want to code formulas into MathML, it can be like a 10 times, a factor of 10 increase in our level of effort. Other questions? Great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.